Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about the future of the workforce, and joining us to contribute to the conversation is David Ciccarelli. Welcome, David. So glad to have you.
Hey, same to you. I'm glad to be here, and I think we have a timely and exciting topic to cover today.
Well, perfect. Do you want to give the folks a little bit about your background?
Sure. My background, I grew up loving music and playing in bands, and kind of, advanced that into a career and really an education first and foremost in audio engineering, where I went to school to learn how to work in a recording studio, record, edit, and mix music and sound for film and video. I actually graduated from the program and opened up my small recording studio of my own. And got my name in the local newspaper on my birthday of all days. And that's newspaper article actually was read by Stephanie, who's now my wife and co-founder in the company, voices.com. And at the time, she was a classically trained vocalist and major at the university. And she was trying to get her singing repertoire done. So she came in and we ended up hitting it off, as I say. But because of that newspaper article, Jenna, that there were other small businesses that wanted a voiceover done for some phone system recordings, for some local commercials. They wanted a female voice, and I had just met Stephanie, so I gave her a ring and said, why don't you come back down to the studio? I will be the engineer, and you be the female voice talent. And so that's how we started working together. We split the money 50-50, and we really progressed that and created a website that soon attracted other freelance voice talent from all around North America, people who spoke different languages, French, Spanish, who did different character voices, celebrity impressions, and we started listing them on this website. And soon there were several dozen. And around that same time, there were other clients at advertising agencies, video production companies that wanted to hire the talent. And that was what a lot of entrepreneurs experience, is the aha moment, like, oh, wow, maybe we should get out of the doing the business, like doing the recording and having Stephanie as the voice talent. Let's, pivot, if you will, into running a marketplace. And now there's all kinds of freelance marketplaces, but ours was the first of its kind for voiceovers. And so we connect the talent on the kind of service provider or supply side of that market with the clients who are really the demand side of the market. They're the ones who need a voice to tell their story, either to educate, inform, or otherwise entertain their audience. And we hope to do that through the power of the human voice. So that's really the journey of my career up to date and a little bit about the company.
No, that's great. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of the workforce. And I think one of the things, given your background and how your company got started, is a lot to do around the freelance economy. And obviously we've seen a lot of that with Uber and with, where you can go to Fiverr and you can, say this, I want a new logo. Actually, our logo, Project Genetics logo, was done on one of those. Yep. Just put it out there and see who's the best fit for you. So what do you think the relevance of this, though, is for larger corporations? Why is it important for them to kind of understand this consider, I guess is a better word, this freelance economy?
Well, I think everyone's, certainly in the last year and a bit, everyone's been concerned about the great resignation. I mean, business owners are contemplating how they're going to staff their companies throughout the pandemic and certainly going into 2022 and beyond. Every year we actually conduct a annual trends report, and the top two trends that we identified actually after surveying over 1,100 of our clients. Number one is that remote work is here to stay. 94% of the people that we surveyed said that productivity had actually been the same or increased in this remote work environment. But coupled with remote work is that freelance talent is on the rise. And especially where there's a need for an area of expertise, like, as you said, a logo designer, if you're a small or medium-sized company who maybe doesn't have a full-time graphic designer on staff, or in our situation, a voice talent, you're unlikely to hire a voice talent full-time. However, from time to time, you might need to update your phone system, maybe put out a corporate video or update your training materials. And you need a voice talent. And so that's where freelance marketplaces can really fill that gap around skill and expertise, where you need it on more of an ad hoc or kind of time-bound project basis, and find expertise in that realm. And so freelance talent on the rise is kind of that number 2 trend that we identified. And speaking of the freelancers themselves, I mean, 75% of them who, again, we had surveyed said that their wages remained stable or grew throughout the pandemic. So people are, if they are, reevaluating their life's priorities, or maybe unfortunately found themselves in a period where they couldn't, carry on their career as they once had, perhaps circumstances out of their control, definitely a lot of people are considering, what am I good at, right? And then how can I leverage or utilize these skills to contribute, to add value to another organization? And so we saw the number of freelancers joining voices.com. Most of them, as I say, are voice talent and audio producers. It grew by 245% last year. So it was one of our fastest growing years in our history. So kind of those two things combined, remote work being here to stay and freelance talent being on the rise, both in terms of the talent looking for work and companies realizing that they can tap into a pool of experts.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that you see this for those roles that are more temporary or project based, because it's maybe something you don't need long term. But what do you think, though, that maybe companies their whole composition might change, in that you're finding more and more people who are interested in kind of owning their destiny, right? And you see this in a lot of independent consultants, where they want to be able to work on the projects or whatever that interests them. And you get paid for what you work, right? Versus sometimes it doesn't feel that way when you're in a corporation, right? Sometimes it feels like, whether, I get paid for 40 hours, it's, but what if I get my job done in 30 hours? Things like that. So do you think that, we might see this trend become even more significant, I guess, than something where I just need voiceover talent, or I need a logo made or whatever, but maybe I need, I don't know. For me, it's like a lot of IT roles that we see it in, but it could span beyond just technology as well.
Yeah, I think there's kind of the three camps of, let's call it creative work, which is the writing, the graphic design, the voiceover. There's the technical skills. In fact, even just this week, we tapped into an expert on some aspects of, that we needed to handle some aspects of our website, that just had a portfolio of work that demonstrated that they knew, and a client list that they knew how to solve this particular issue for us. And then I would say then there's the administrative tasks. Could be anything from accounting to virtual assistants to data entry and honestly kind of data cleanup or management as well too, not just entering it into a system, but enriching data. So, almost irrespective of which industry you might find yourself in, there's absolutely a demand for companies who are either having a hard time finding a full-time employee, or recognize that that it is more time-bound, but in terms of the project. But in both situations, there are absolutely companies who take a freelance first approach, where almost their default posture is, well, surely I can find an expert out there. And as sometimes the saying goes, you kind of get to try before you buy, if you will. I can work a few projects and see if there actually is enough need for this role full-time before working with that individual. And you might even be able to extend the offer to that individual that you're working with on a more permanent or full-time basis. But, Jen, I think that the pandemic has certainly, I'm going to say, despite it being tremendously challenging on so many people and so many of us, that I think it's opened up other opportunities for people who maybe don't work in a major metropolitan center. Maybe they have great skills and capabilities, They can now tap into work from clients or employers from around the world. And likewise, many businesses, including our own, are realizing that they can work with people from around the world, have kind of a remote workforce.
Yeah.
And truth be told, we had never done we had never done a video conference call in our company of 150 employees ever. We had everybody on site. There was no need for it, despite there being Zoom, and we had done, phone conference calls, and all of our board meetings were face to face. There was just, people were set up on desktop computers, not even laptops in a lot of situations. So, kind of having that very rapid transition to a remote workforce has not just proven that it's people can be as productive, if not more so, but it's also opened up other opportunities to consider. Well, we don't just have to hire somebody locally. Maybe we can look within the region, across the country, and perhaps even around the world to find that right person that would be a good fit for our organization.
Yeah, we a couple of thoughts there. Yeah, we opened offices in Australia, and so when the pandemic hit, I actually had just gone out to Australia and had planned to be there for a little while. But I don't know how much you followed it, but the borders of Australia closed, and so I
Yes.
ended up staying there much longer than I had anticipated. And I at the time was delivering for a client, and so would work, U.S. time, noon to end of day. It was a part-time contract, but would work noon to the end of the day, and ended up bringing on 2 or 3 other people from Australia to work on that same project. But yeah, we worked afternoons. We got up early, like 5 a.m., 4 a.m., something like that. But we were able to successfully get through the project. And so there is, I am starting to see some of that, those boundaries break down. Obviously, time zones make it challenging to really, I think, take that to the extreme. But I have seen it. But then the other thing I was going to comment on was, a lot of organizations that I've seen, and this is not, I have no numbers to back this up. This is purely anecdotal from what I've observed, but there are a lot of companies that it seems like a 50-50 mix between employees and contractors allow the company to expand and contract as they, need to, based on, revenue and whatever projects and things they have going on. It's just something I've noticed. I don't know if you have thoughts around that.
Yeah, I'd actually listened to the one of the shareholder calls of Upwork, arguably the largest freelance kind of marketplace going. And Hayden Brown, the CEO, had described kind of how, why businesses are really embracing freelancers more than ever before, because exactly as you described, kind of this allows for these kind of 3 different work scenarios to play out. Either this kind of quick expansion, like we land the big contract we've always been wanted, but we need to staff up very quickly. Or conversely, we wrap up a project, we need to staff down until we kind of land the next engagement, if you will. And then there's kind of that third one, which I was really touching on earlier, which is, specialized expertise. And so I think, whether it's, 50-50 or some combination thereof, I think it's fair to say that, both remote work and in particular freelance is just being embraced more so than it ever has before. It's not kind of the afterthought that maybe it once was 5-10 years ago. It's more of like an equal consideration when contemplating kicking off a project. What's the best, most efficient way to get a project started and see it through to success?
And so some of the benefits then that I, kind of think of is, you mentioned expertise, right? So you can go out there and get the best of the best, or the best that you can find to handle a project, or bring them in for a certain period of time. You've also mentioned try before you buy,
Mm-hmm.
which works both well on the employee and the employer side, right? Like, is this a good fit without having too much of a long-term commitment? And then, I think about if you have a mixed workforce, you avoid layoffs, which because you can let your contracted workforce go because there's an expected end date to that anyway.
Yeah.
Can you think of other benefits then, really, that companies should, why they might consider if they aren't doing much of this?
Definitely when there's a project that needs to be started quickly, rather than learning the skills on your own. I mean, that's really the trade-off is going to be time or money. Either we're going to take the time to learn it, take the time to hire somebody, bring them on full time, or we're going to outsource or delegate, if you will, to somebody who has expertise. Now, so I think there's a time to market, but there's also a time, like you're kind of reducing the learning curve, if you will, by being able to, in effect, post a job, review candidates, and hire somebody, generally speaking, within a matter of days. So I think bridging, basically getting projects off the ground quickly, bridging any gaps that might exist within a team or a company or even a specific project. Those are definitely, what come top of mind. I maybe to dispel perhaps the myth that freelance is perhaps cheaper. I don't think it's necessarily cheaper on a like hour by hour basis. Maybe you can kind of time bound the project to be certain, like a scope of work is a little bit
Yeah,
more framed up and generally speaking outcome based as well
right.
too, where you're paying for success or paying for a deliverable as opposed to as we was said, paying for just effort and hours in, rather than paying for the input, you're paying for the output, if you will.
Yeah,
So those are a few kind of additional benefits that come top of mind.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. I mean, I think you're right. A pure hour by hour basis, it's probably not cheaper, but there are costs that are hidden in employment that you don't have in a freelance, around all, benefits aside, just, all the taking care of, having the HR department and all the things they do, the taxes, et cetera, that you pay, unemployment tax, things like that you pay on employees, is one thing. And then the second thing I was thinking is that, I find that if you hire somebody, with a statement of work and this focused project, that oftentimes the resources you bring in for that are often more efficient than employees, because they do that same work time and time again. They go from company to company doing it. And so they could actually maybe get it done faster on a time basis. And then I guess finally, like you said, if you do it outcomes based, then you're just saying, well, what is this worth to me? And that's what I'm paying. And that person could take as long or as short as it needs, right? I mean, obviously within reason, because you need your result, but you definitely have the benefit of then you're just paying what you think the value is.
For sure. The point you made about the templates, kind of templating the work and almost becoming known as an expert on how to do something very efficiently. That's where a freelancer actually gains the leverage. They're priced on value as opposed to time and effort put into it. As an example, I mean, even within voiceover, it's not priced on time, to record, because often the recording is like 5 minutes of recording. Maybe it takes 10 minutes, but it's probably going to be priced into a couple $100s. Now, if you did that on an hourly basis, you'd be like, I would never pay $2,000 an hour for, like, that would be kind of the equivalent. But the fact is, they have a full recording studio. They have probably 10 years of experience. They're bringing all of this, to the table. And the efficiency of being able to do it in that kind of quick turnaround is, I think, as you said, whether it's templated or process oriented, they can, bring that to you without feeling like they're revealing their secret sauce. They're just saying, keep coming back to me. Really, if you need something done, delivered quickly and professionally, I'm your guy or gal. So I think those are all great benefits. And maybe if I may add just one more, because you'd mentioned around the time zones, as challenging as that can be, I think if you're disorganized, that could be very problematic. However, if you're organized, I mean, there's nothing better than going to sleep and waking up and having something in your inbox kind of delivered the next morning, almost this feeling of like, wow, we are this global entity. There's work happening around the clock, this almost this real-time 24/7 nature of your business. And doing that really can help you build momentum in the business. So I think these kind of these attributes of working efficiently and at speed and presenting something new to the market, I think these are all benefits that are hard to replicate in any other model.
Yeah, and I guess, on the international thing, it really kind of depends on the type of work, because you're right. Like we worked with some people and we were collaborating, we were helping them write their RFP, and so we actually did this follow the sun, because it was the US, South Africa, and Australia, and so literally we could every 8 hours hand it off to the next team to be working on it, and that worked really well. In the case of what we were doing with the project, like we're on conference calls constantly. And so that's where, the time zones can become challenging, is if you're having to collaborate with these other time zones. But, you'll find that there are people, I found people who are willing to get up at 4 and 5 in the morning because they're morning people. So, it wasn't a problem to be able for them to be able to, help this client out. And the other thing for them, because was that meant they could also get, if they chose to, more hours in the day, because they would work, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., for the US, and then work their Australia day. And, for them, that was something that appealed to them. So there's definitely benefits there. But yeah, I think you have to be discerning in the type of project you have, and what's the best way to achieve that work.
And I think that goes both ways. I would encourage those companies and employers out there. You're a manager of a project. I mean, the more that you can put into that RFP or the scope of work or the creative brief, I think eliminates a lot of questions and revisiting and debating downstream. So the more that's contemplated in advance does a couple things. I think it just serves as like that point of truth of, hey, remember, here are the goals of the project. We agreed upon these particular deliverables on this, date. It also allows for the freelance talent, if you will, to properly evaluate if this is a good opportunity for them. Notoriously in the world of voiceover, one of the projects that sounds like it would be fun would be narrating audiobooks. However, most audiobooks are, several hundred pages long of script. For every hour of recording, the general rule of thumb is 3 to 4 hours of, listening back and editing. So a 6-hour audiobook might have taken 12, 15, 16 hours to actually do. And when you kind of break that down, you realize this isn't the most efficient work to be done. So that would be kind of an example where the talent really needs all of that. The freelancer really needs all of that information up front so they can properly evaluate and ultimately meet your expectations as an employer as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the dark side of freelancing and the gig economy. Obviously with when you're hiring somebody, you have somewhat of control over their work product because they're an employee and you can direct them, more than if you have a contractor. Like, the nature of contracting is that you give them the goal, but they can get to the goal how they, see fit, right? Like, so you have less control there. And then as well, I know this is the thing that overwhelms a lot of people, is how do you tell you're getting somebody good? So maybe we talk a little bit in the perspective of your company Voices, but also in the broader perspective, what are some things you do to or that companies should do to ensure that they're getting the quality that they need?
So I think, the quality. So let's look at it from the employer's perspective. I think it really does come down with the brief or the job posting, if you will. Most of these freelance sites, voices.com included, take a similar approach. You're posting a job describing, who you're looking for, what's the scope of work, any budget or kind of expectations you might have for that. And then really your, any response deadline or ultimate project deadline. That is really critical. What you're looking to get back, though, are either samples of that person's work, meaning their portfolio sample, even if it's, which for creative services, it definitely lends itself to here are my graphic design examples, here's sample recordings of my voice or my video editing skills or music composition. Where it becomes a little bit more challenging could possibly be on like web development or some other technical skills. So what has worked kind of irrespective of the skill that you're seeking is starting with a smaller project at the outset. We see a lot of this kind of, we actually coined a term calling the trust sale or the trust hire, where you might have the project that might be 10,000 words or $10,000, however, like sizable, right? But you start off with something like, just to kind of iron out the kinks in the process to make sure, yes, this is indeed the person I want to work with. And that might be a few $100s. So let's call that the insurance policy, that you're starting with a small project to ultimately rehire them for the much larger project. So I would go with the portfolio of examples. And if it's hard to find a portfolio, or you're still want to have some additional assurances, the next would be hiring on a smaller limited basis. Either way, when hiring, I'm an advocate for the use of paying through the platform. I mean, there's countless times where it seems like everything's going to be all on the up and up and fine, and then either the talent doesn't deliver or the client gets the work and doesn't pay. So, again, depending on what side you are as a listener on a freelance marketplace, I mean, it is how all of these platforms do generate income. So I'm certainly, an advocate of that. But I do think it does protect the client to ensure that if something goes wrong, they can get help hiring somebody else, or they can, the deliverable that didn't come through at all. In effect, the payment's held in an escrow account, or if you will, in trust, until the work's delivered. Then the payment's made to that freelance talent. So I think that would be yet another way to protect your employer. And likewise for the talent, you're guaranteed to get paid. There's, we developed our payment system called SurePay in 2009, actually, and patented it in the US and Canada, because talent at the time were delivering MP3 files or WAV files, audio files, to a client. You don't know if they're down the street or halfway around the world. And once they have that audio file, they don't, good luck trying to get it back. How are you going to chase them down? I mean, and so it just becomes, a real obvious problem if the payment isn't captured up front. And I think that's another area where the marketplace itself can serve as that trusted intermediary between buyer and seller, if you will.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of things. So, when you're talking about the small project, one of the things we did recently was a client hired us to do the planning phase of the project, and that was the tryout, right? So, and the kind of mutual benefit was they could see how we do, whether or not it was going to be a good fit, right? Because this is a large project, so number of team members involved, and regardless, at the end of the phase, even if they didn't want to keep us on, they still had a deliverable that they could leverage if they were to go with somebody else. And then on the flip side, we still got paid for the work we did, right? One of the challenging things is with some of these large projects is a lot of companies expect you to put a lot of effort into like an RFP or something, and into a response, where you might spend 40, 50, 60 hours of your team's time responding to an RFP and showing them all these, you know, your portfolio, your evidence that, you know, they should hire you, and then you don't win the gig. And so, you know, that can be really frustrating. It's like trying to decide which ones you really have a chance of winning, because you're going to put, you know, potentially unrecoverable dollars into it. So that was a really cool, I thought, way to approach it, was like, well, hey, we'll bring you in. We're only going to contract you for this much of the project. So, you know, we as the client are not at risk. And I think it worked out really well. So I liked that. And then, you know, the other piece you were talking about with the, you know, I think that is a benefit where you were talking about, if you're using the marketplace would have insurance. And it's kind of a funny analogy, but when I wanted to hire a cleaner at one point, and, you know, you can either hire them independently, right? And it's usually far less expensive if you go find somebody who just cleans houses on their own, and they usually do a really great job. But on the flip side, if you hire a company, they have insurance, and protects both the cleaner and the client. Also, if the person gets sick, sometimes they can either swap other people out, or if, you know, they decide to quit, they have other people who can fill in. And so, you know, that marketplace type of approach can definitely be, you know, it's more expensive, but you're getting something for that. Or potentially more expensive. I'm sure it depends on the market.
Yeah, no, I actually think that's a really good example. But I mean, just rewinding to your comment about taking a big project and breaking it up into phases. I love that. I love especially if there's a distinct planning phase, and it's not just the evaluation of the deliverable. It's also an employer also might want to just understand, hey, what's the communication style? Are you prompt and available for a Zoom call or a Google Meet? You know, emails, how quickly are they getting responded to? All of these, you know, maybe call it business etiquette and communication approaches, which, you know, aren't always the greatest. It's not something that's exactly kind of taught in any business school that I know of. It's just an expected behavior. Now, if that's missing, it could mean that the project itself just is, even though the deliverables are satisfactory, the way that we got there might have been more painful. And that type of phased in approach, you know, certainly is an example of that. And one, you know, if I may, that we did like that was actually a market research study. We went out to a couple firms, ultimately selected one kind of interviewing and doing first party interviews with the clients, and then another group interviewing the talent. Some of it we actually did in-house as well too. So it doesn't mean that you find one firm that you necessarily have to give all of the work to all of them. That was just, we felt that they had different expertise and kind of understood the market a little bit differently, which is why we divided up the work as well too. And in fact, that actually allowed us to complete all of the projects, you know, in a shorter time span. Instead of it taking 2 months, we kind of divided and conquered and got it done in one.
Yeah, you know, and going back to what you said about communication and some of those things, the other really benefit though was even beyond those maybe basics that you would expect. It was how well do you work together with each other, right? And so it was, I mean, like sometimes, you know, one of the things we really focus on at Project Genetics is putting the right consultant with the right client, because sometimes you have clients that are very rigid and some that are very flexible, and, you know, rigidity won't work in their company, or sometimes you have to have one, you know, that the environment's very structured, et cetera. And so, you know, there's something to be said of how do the cultures fit. And so if you can you know, if you're on a big project and you can chunk it up and you can kind of test the team, you have an opportunity to see, is this does this mesh well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, the other component that we, you know, haven't touched on yet that is enabling all of this work is the abundance of, you know, software tools, particularly project management, whether it's Jira or Confluence or Asana or Monday.com. I mean, these are all tools, let alone, setting up a discrete Slack channel just for this particular project is something that we've done as well too. Or sharing a folder where all project files are actually in this particular Google Drive or Dropbox. So there's lots of ways that the work can get done that just doesn't need to necessarily have, people on the same email account, just emailing files around the office. We can actually collaborate in real time. And so I think that's been kind of another aspect. It almost seems like companies are willing to invite in external parties that are not part of their, at company domain name, if you will, email address, invite them in to, be it a Slack channel or a Google Drive folder to be able to kind of collaborate, again, all in the name of speed and efficiency.
No, yeah. I mean, there's definitely been there's some great tools, and just a little side note, I'm kind of curious about what the metaverse will be like in that, as well as like, will we be able to show up in a virtual office and kind of gain back some of what we lost with, the virtual meetings all the time, right? Like you could have a virtual whiteboard that you're literally writing on, or, things like that.
Whiteboard's an example as one that I feel of all of the office productivity tools that I miss the most over the last couple of years. It really has been the whiteboard. I was always an avid student of art growing up as well too, and always seemed to have a pen or a pencil in my hand and doodling. And when that wasn't there, I've just ended up filling these Moleskine notebooks up with lots. But however it's done, probably and they're even like Google has Jamboard. A friend of mine actually had started a company a number of years ago called Stormboard, which is almost like, a series of templates like Kanban or business model Canvas, and a lot of these type of almost like preset templates to enable brainstorming in like a virtual environment. They're not quite the same as being able to to draw on a whiteboard or a clear board, but they're getting close.
Yeah, my some of my team, I can't remember what the name of it is, but they actually, like on a WebEx, they sign in both on their computer and then on their iPad, and then there's something on an iPad that lets them actually draw and annotate the way, more the way you're used to doing it. And so that was really cool to see, because you can get like whiteboard.com, I think is Microsoft's. But the challenge is it's still not draw. Well, maybe with some computers, but with my computer, you can't draw still.
Yeah, unless you have a stylus or, it's on an iPad where you're using your finger, it's pretty difficult to draw with a mouse. Let's say that.
Exactly. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I guess, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on wrapping up, the top 3 things you want the audience to know about the freelance economy.
Yeah, well, I think I guess pare it back. What we've heard from the 1,000+ people that we had surveyed is really to embrace those trends, that remote work is here to stay. If you're in some way kind of in denial and thinking that you're going to just all of a sudden, your entire company go back to the office, I would challenge that belief and realize that this might be more of a permanent situation. Therefore, embrace it. And what does that mean? You can probably hire more freelance talent, and I would encourage that, certainly for creative services like voiceover audio editing. Maybe a podcast is on the horizon for your company in 2022. But those are kind of the things that are of top of mind for me. And if you're someone who's looking for, the proverbial side hustle or side gig, there's an abundance of platforms out there that are actually specialized, likely for your given skill. So I'd encourage you to do some Googling around and find some freelance clients of your own. I think that you'll find that tremendously rewarding. Is one of the things that we hear most often from the talent that we work with, that it's the flexibility on a day-to-day basis, but also the fulfillment, the personal fulfillment in being able to contribute directly to a project and seeing your efforts, the fruits of your efforts, if you will. So hopefully that's helpful for someone out there listening. Encourage you to take that first step in starting a freelance career as well.
No, that's great. And David, how can folks find out more about what you do and your company?
Sure. The best place to go to is voices.com. The name says what we do in a single word. And if you have a question, you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd love that. Just David Ciccarelli on LinkedIn. Always looking to, be a source or a resource to you. If you have a question about freelancing or the space, or looking to tap into some of the research that we've done, I can probably point you in the right direction pretty quickly.
Well, sounds great. Thanks so much for being a guest with us today, David.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be with you.
All right. Until next time, keep your organizations healthy.